joining us on the telephone is the author of Time to Get Tough, Mr. Donald Trump. Happy New Year to you, Donald.
Good morning. Happy New Year.
How are you?
I'm very good. Thank you.
Hey, there's a report out that activists in the state of Texas have filed for a third-party run for you, perhaps, to run for president, trying to create the Make America Great Again party. What do you know about this? And is that your first foray into the official 2012 run for president?
Well, I just heard about it. In fact, I heard about it on your show. And frankly, I think it's a great name, Make America Great. That's the name, because that's what it's all about, making America great.
Sure.
But I don't know anything about it. Certainly there are millions of people that would like to see me do something, not because of me, but because I want to protect this nation. We're being eaten alive by other nations and by, frankly, people that are not smart that are representing us.
Well, one of the people who wants you to run is your friend Roger Stone. We had him on Fox and Friends yesterday, and he said you have all of your ducks in a row and you could make an independent run. Let's listen to what he said this weekend.
He's made it clear. The forms are there for all to see. Buy the book. He's worth $7 billion. I think he has about $350 million cash on hand. So he has the personal resources to launch a very late independent bid and affect this race.
He knows a lot about your finances. And so Donald, we're just curious, what has changed in your mind since May when you said you didn't want to get into the presidential race because you didn't want to leave the lucrative Apprentice franchise?
Well, I've been saying from the beginning that if the Republicans pick the wrong candidate, somebody that's going to lose, which is certainly possible when you look at what's going on. I mean, look at what's happening in Iowa. It's crazy. If they pick the wrong candidate and if the economy continues to be bad, our leadership continues to be bad, which that one I can predict will definitely happen. I mean, our leadership is terrible in this country. I would certainly consider it, and I would be able to do it. As you know, I switched to an independent because if I didn't do it by the 1st of January, I wouldn't be able to do it. So I did make that switch. I didn't want to make the switch, but that's the way the laws read. So I did make the switch, and I do have my ducks in line if I want to do it. But I'd love to see the Republicans pick somebody that was going to win and take over this country and, frankly, to use the expression, make America great again.
You know, Donald, welcome to the new year. I do know that you follow this thing. You're extremely aggressive when it comes to what's going on in the politics. You say, what's going on in Iowa? What's going on in Iowa that has your eyebrows raised?
Well, I think when somebody like Ron Paul gets such a large percentage of the vote, potentially, I look at the polls, and I think it's absolutely madness to even think about it. I just see the candidates go up and down. It's like yo-yos. They go up, they go down, they're gone, they're forever forgotten. Then they reemerge. Now, what's going on is very strange. I don't think I've ever seen anything like it, and I've been following politics for a long time.
In my mind, Ron Paul is one of the people that would force you to get in because you do not think he can get elected. Is Rick Santorum the other?
Well, I don't want to say now. It's a little bit too early. Let's see what happens. I like Rick Santorum. I spoke to him a couple of times. I like him. He's a really nice guy. And he's done very well. You have to give him credit. I mean, he was at 1% for so long. All of a sudden, he's shooting up. You have to give him credit in terms of, one of the things I write about success is never give up. Certainly, he never gave up, and he's doing very well.
He is. Of course, a lot of people this time of year make predictions for the coming year, and since you have made, and we just heard Roger Stone say you've got a bunch of dough in the bank, what's your prediction economically for the coming year for people watching?
Well, I think the economy is basically going to keep trudging along the way it is. I think you're going to have very high unemployment. I think that there's going to be no catastrophic events, although Europe could hurt us, but, you could also say Europe is a competitor. People forget. They did the euro in order to hurt the United States. The European nations, they got together and they created the euro. Why did they do that? To better bargain against the United States. So, that's one of those things. It's not as sinister as what China is doing to us, not as sinister as what OPEC is doing to us, but the euro was done really not to the benefit of the United States, and now it's coming home to them, and it's not a good situation. But I think that the economy will be pretty much as it is because people are waiting to see what happens in November. And if the right person gets in, I think you're going to see a tremendous thing happen in this country. We have tremendous potential if we had proper leadership, which we don't.
What I was really concerned about as an American is the president's new strategy of disengaging. He's not going to deal with Congress for an entire year?
Well, he's really, when you talk about somebody trying to get elected, and it's probably a good thing for him to get elected, but it's a very bad thing for the nation. He has absolutely created class warfare. I mean, I see it all the time. I see it even in people I'm meeting. You have groups of people fighting each other, and that's what he wants, and that's what he's good at. And frankly, in terms of a strategy to get elected, I think it's wonderful. In terms of what's good for this country, it's horrible, and he should be ashamed of it.
Well, apparently what he's trying to do is he's trying to invoke what Harry Truman did with the do-nothing Congress. Look, these guys up on Capitol Hill, he doesn't mention that half of the houses are held by Democrats, they're not doing anything, so I'm going to go directly to the American people, like Harry Truman. Wait a minute, with Harry Truman, the buck stops there with responsibility, yet it sounds like the president's punting.
A real leader would get the Republicans and the Democrats together and get this country going. That's a real leader. We don't have a real leader. We have somebody that how he ever got into that position is mind-boggling.
Well, Donald, thanks so much for joining us. Happy New Year. A great year to you. And keep us posted on what you decide to do with the run. And, of course, you'll join us again every Monday, as you always do.
And, Donald, as a special tribute to your appearance, we're going to wear Donald Trump ties every Monday. Is that okay?
I certainly hope so.
They've already begun. You'll be happy to know.
Yeah, they're
Thank
everywhere.
you very much. I love the show.
All right.
Thank you, Donald. Happy New Year.
If Donald Trump wants to endorse before the Iowa caucus, well, he better hurry up. Right now may be his last chance for pre-Iowa caucus endorsement. Donald Trump joins us by phone. Good evening, sir. And you have said so often that your endorsement is very powerful. On the eve of, we're about 22 hours away from the doors opening, are you interested in endorsing a candidate?
Not at this moment, Greta. I'll be maybe making that decision soon, but I have not decided as of this moment to endorse anybody.
All right. There is a report today that you're even still considering running. Is that still in the mix?
Well, there's a group of people, a large group of people that want me to. I think they did some filing or something out in Texas because you had to have it filed prior to January 1st, and I'm honored by that. But it's nothing that I've been involved in, and we'll see what happens.
I'll fill in the blanks a little bit. These Texas activists have filed paperwork to create the, quote, Make America Great Again party, and with the single purpose to encourage you to run for president.
Well, I do love the name. I think the name of the party is fantastic because that really is what it's all about. America soon will not be great. A lot of people would say right now it is not great. You look at what's happening in the world. You look at what's happening with other countries. They're eating our lunch. We don't have any leadership. And it's really a very sad thing what's going on with this country. So I think the name is a great name. I will say that.
What's your reflection on what's going on in Iowa, the caucus, and in part the level of vitriol between and among the candidates and also the presence of the super PACs, which have only added fuel to the vitriol?
Well, a little bit, and to a certain extent it's playing into Obama's hands because the level of dislike, I just listened to Rick Perry talking about his friend, and, they're all friends. They all talk about friends, but they're not friends, obviously, and they're doing very negative campaigning. And it really plays into the hands of Obama to a certain extent, and that's what we can't allow. We can't allow Obama to win. This country has been set back so far under his leadership or lack of leadership, and we cannot allow that to happen.
All right. Governor Sarah Palin was on our air earlier today, and she had this to say about you. I'm curious what you think about it. Let me play what she said first.
Donald Trump has a lot to offer. He is a businessman. He understands that government's overreach just quashes the ability for him and others to create jobs for the rest of us who so desire to make it on our own and not to look to government to make it for us. So, for those who have continued to cut down Donald Trump, I say, enough is enough. Just shut up about it and don't vote for him if he's a third-party candidate. Work even harder for your candidate.
Two things. One is obviously you've got an ally. She's certainly a fan. Secondly, she's sort of hinting that if indeed you run as a third-party candidate, and of course then that leads to the problem is if there's a third-party candidate, is that playing into the Democratic playbook and guaranteeing a Democratic win in November?
Well, first of all, I think she's a terrific person. I've gotten to know her, and she loves this country, and she's really an amazing woman, and I have a lot of respect for her, so I appreciate her words. I was leading in the polls when I left, when I decided that I wouldn't run as a Republican. I was leading in the polls and leading even substantially in the polls, and that was literally as I left. In fact, I was watching Meet the Press, one of your slight competitors, and I was leading in the polls. And then the next day I said, I'm going to be doing what I'm going to be doing. So it's sort of interesting. I have a lot of people that I don't know if they like me. I think they like what I'm saying. They don't want to be ripped off by the world. We're like a whipping post for OPEC and for China and for India and for anybody that does business. You know, we used to be the kings, and we're not the kings anymore.
Do you regret pulling out tonight as you watch on the eve of this caucus and you see everyone sort of running around the state and trying to convince voters to vote for them and a little blood on the floor in the process? Do you wish you had stayed in a little bit?
Well, what people don't realize is that I really have a legal responsibility. You know, I have a very successful show, and if you haven't, I think it's very unfair because, you know, Obama can go around, do television programs, can fly around in Air Force One, can raise funds, and using our money to raise funds for his own campaign, which is about the only thing he's good at. And frankly, I think it's very unfair. But because I have a show called The Apprentice, I'm not allowed to run. It's an equal time provision. I'm not allowed to run. So I wouldn't have been allowed to run as a Republican because of the show, as you know.
Are you taking this, though, dead serious, or just sort of playing with people in terms of because, you know, the intrigue, because you got a lot of followers? Or are you really, in your mind, dead serious about considering running as an independent?
Well, you know, as I've said to you and others, Greta, if the Republicans pick the wrong candidate, which is a possibility.
But what is that?
I mean, you look at what happens. Well, we're going to see very soon whether or not it's going to be the right candidate, in my opinion. I mean, number one, it's got to be a candidate. The biggest thing, it's got to be a candidate that can beat Obama. If that candidate is not going to, in my opinion, beat Obama, and if the economy continues to be bad, which I think it will be because we have no leadership whatsoever, then I will certainly consider it very strongly.
In terms of the group of candidates that are running now, is there any Republican candidate running in Iowa now who you think can't beat President Obama?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Who?
Well,
Who can't beat President?
I don't think Ron Paul would have even a little chance of beating him. I don't think he'd have
anyone else?
And I think that the fact that he's doing so well in the polls, I can't imagine he does well, but if he won, I think it would be a tremendous black eye for Iowa, and I really think it would bring Iowa down as the first great state in terms of the process. I really think it would be a very, very bad thing for the reputation of Iowa.
Is there any other candidate who you think couldn't beat President Obama in November?
Yes, but I'm not going to mention the names of
them yet. Give me a hint.
Because I'd rather be positive. I'd rather let's see what happens. But at a certain point in the fairly near future, I'll be letting my views be known. But certainly there are some that I think could win, and there are some that I think could not win.
All right, one last question, Long, and they'll stop being a dead horse. All right, so you say Ron Paul, you say there are others. How many more of the others do you think couldn't beat President Obama out of the universe that are running?
Well, I don't really want to make a big deal of that tonight, Greta, because it doesn't matter. But I don't think Ron Paul would have even a little bit of a chance. And, you know, I don't think he'll run as a third-party candidate, by the way, because I don't think his son could allow that.
With 41% undecided tonight, do you think it's fair to say that nobody knows who's going to win tomorrow night?
Probably that's true. And if you look at it, it's like a bunch of yo-yos in terms of it goes up, it goes down. One person's leading. I mean, you go from 1%. And, you know, whether you like Rick Santorum or not, I mean, he never gives up. I write books about never give up, never quit, never, ever, ever quit. Well, he never quit. And it's sort of amazing when you look at what happened. I'm not saying love him, like him, or anything else, but he never quit. And you see somebody going from 1% to being number 3. It's a very, very unstable process. There's no question about it.
All right, and are you going to stay up to midnight to watch our special Live on the Record tomorrow night?
Only if you're on the show.
I am. We're going to expect you. We're going to have lots of coffee. We'll see you at midnight. We'll talk. Thank you, Donald.
Very good. So long, Greta.
And straight ahead, what is going to happen?
On an ABC News exclusive, Brian Ross has been investigating a car company that received big government funding to make very expensive electric cars of the future and put thousands of Americans to work building them. But so far, those cars are being made overseas. And Brian Ross, you investigated. What's going on here, Brian?
Well, good morning, Robin. The Obama administration has used taxpayer money to place what is essentially a billion-dollar bet on electric cars. And this morning, we have a first look at one of them. A car that, for all its sleek design and energy efficiency, is also raising questions about whether it could end up as another taxpayer boondoggle.
It's called the Karma, the result of a $170 million federal loan to the Fisker Car Company. It's the creation of Hendrik Fisker, a famed European auto designer who took ABC News for a test drive in one of the first of his half-electric, half-gas vehicles to come off the line.
You can hear it's very quiet, but you hear a little bit the noise.
Priced at $97,000, it's all luxury. So quiet that artificial engine noise is pumped through speakers so pedestrians can hear it coming. Fisker got a federal loan 2 years ago of more than $500 million, with Vice President Joseph Biden saying the company would employ auto workers in his home state, Delaware.
This is seed money that will return back to the American consumer in billions and billions and billions of dollars in good new jobs.
And so far, the U.S. money has helped to create some 500 auto assembly factory jobs. But they are not in the United States, rather here at this plant in Finland. While U.S. taxpayer money is being spent only on American design and parts, Fisker says he decided, with government approval, to assemble his fancy car in Finland because no U.S. facility, he says, would do it, even with so many American auto workers laid off.
Manufacturing are in Finland, that's correct, but those are...
You think that's a good use of U.S. taxpayer money?
Yeah.
Fisker says his plan is to eventually produce a cheaper, compact version of the car at the plant in Delaware, where he says there will be thousands of jobs. But the company has had delays and won't start production here until at least next year.
Should taxpayers worry about that money, the $500 million plus that has been guaranteed?
No, I don't think you need to worry about it.
The first Fisker Karma was delivered to Leonardo DiCaprio. And Fisker says as more cars are shipped to the U.S. from Finland, Americans will come to appreciate what he has created.
The Department of Energy says it knew the cars would be assembled in Finland, and that's why they couldn't have been made here in the U.S. The spokesperson said that ultimately, if Fisker is successful, it will mean thousands of jobs in this country. There are lots of questions about this, and we'll have more on our investigation conducted with the Center for Public Integrity tonight on World News at Nightline, Robin.
Well, good, because as you said, there are so many questions and people want some answers.
Exactly.
I know
right.
you'll find them. Thank you, Brian.
We turn now to politics and a kind of story.
Ron Paul, a leading anti-war voice in Congress.
We should only go to the war when the people in this country declare the war.
Texas Congressman Ron Paul.
I'm Ron Paul, a congressman from Texas. I am pleased to be here to debate because this is a very important debate, but I am convinced that needless and unnecessary wars are a great detriment. They undermine our prosperity and our liberties. They add to our deficits and they consume our welfare. We should take a careful look at our foreign policy.
Our leadoff question is from the Honorable Ed Meese, the former Attorney General of the United States, who's representing the Heritage Foundation.
At least 42 terrorist attacks aimed at the United States have been thwarted since 9/11. Tools like the Patriot Act have been instrumental in finding and stopping terrorists. Shouldn't we have a long-range extension of the investigative powers contained in that act so that our law enforcement officers can have the tools that they need?
Congressman Paul, I suspect you disagree.
I do.
Tell us why.
I think the Patriot Act is unpatriotic because it undermines our liberty. I'm concerned, as everybody is, about the terrorist attack. Timothy McVeigh was a vicious terrorist. He was arrested. Terrorism, still on the books, internationally and nationally, is a criminal. It's a crime, and we should deal with it. We dealt with it rather well with Timothy McVeigh. But why I really fear it is we have drifted into a condition that we were warned against because our early founders were very clear. They said, don't be willing to sacrifice liberty for security. Today, it seems too easy that our government and our Congresses are so willing to give up our liberties for our security. I have a personal belief that you never have to give up liberty for security. You can still provide security without sacrificing our Bill of Rights.
I want to bring others in, but do you want to respond, Mr. Speaker?
Yeah. Timothy McVeigh succeeded. That's the whole point. Timothy McVeigh killed a lot of Americans. I don't want a law that says, after we lose a major American city, we're sure going to come and find you. I want a law that says, you try to take out an American city, we're going to stop you.
This is like saying that we need a policeman in every house, a camera in every house, because we want to prevent child beating and wife beating. You can prevent crimes by becoming a police state. So if you advocate the police state, yes, you can have safety and security, and you might prevent a crime, but the crime then will be against the American people and against our freedoms, and we will throw out so much of what our revolution was fought for. So don't do it so carelessly.
This profiling, who would be profiled?
Well, the folks who are most likely to be committing these crimes. If you look at it, I mean, obviously it was people. Obviously, Muslims would be someone you'd look at. Absolutely, those are the folks who are the radical Muslims, are the people that are committing these crimes, as we've by and large, as well as younger males. I mean, these are things that not exclusively, but these are things that you profile to find your best, the most likely candidate.
Congressman Paul,
that's digging a hole for ourselves. What if they look like Timothy McVeigh? You know, he was pretty tough criminals. I think we're using too much carelessness in the use of words that we're at war. I don't remember voting on a declaration of war. Oh, war against terrorism. And terrorism is a tactic. It isn't a person. It isn't a people. So this is a very careless use of words. What about this? Sacrifice liberties because they're terrorists? You're the judge and the jury? No, they're suspects. And they have changed in the DOD budget, they have changed the wording on the definition of Al-Qaeda and Taliban. It's anybody associated with organizations, which means almost anybody can be loosely associated. So that makes all Americans vulnerable. And now we know that American citizens are vulnerable to assassination. So I would be very cautious about protecting the rule of law. It will be a sacrifice that you'll be sorry for.
Is it okay for Muslim Americans to get more intensive pat-downs or security when they go through airports than Christian Americans or Jewish Americans?
No, Blitz, that's oversimplifying it. I happen to believe that if you allow our intelligence agencies to do their job, they can come up with an approach. I'm sorry, Blitz, I meant Wolf, okay? Blitz, Wolf. Since we on a Blitz debate,
I agree with Ron Paul. We are not fighting a war on terrorism. Terrorism is a tactic.
If Israel attacked Iran to prevent Tehran from getting nuclear weapons, would you help Israel launch the attack? Congressman Paul, would you support Israel and help Israel in such an attack?
No, I wouldn't do that. But there'd be good reasons, because I don't expect it to happen, because, you know, the Mossad leader that just retired said it would be the stupidest thing to do in the world. And it's a big argument over in Israel. They're not about to do this. They've just polled 40 major experts on foreign policy here by the National Journal. Now, one of them said there should be a unilateral attack on the sites in Iran. So that's not going to happen. And if it did, you're supposing that if it did, why does Israel need our help? We need to get out of their way. I mean, we interfere with them. We interfere with them when they deal with their borders, when they want to have peace treaties. We tell them what they can do because we buy their allegiance and they sacrifice their sovereignty to us. And then they decide they want to bomb something. That's their business, but they should, you know, suffer the consequences. When they bombed the Iraqi missile site, nuclear site back in the 80s, I was one of the few in Congress that said it's none of our business, and Israel should take care of themselves. Israel has 200, 300 nuclear missiles, and they can take care of themselves. Why should we commit? We don't even have a treaty with Israel. Why do we have this automatic commitment that we're going to send our kids and send our money endlessly to Israel? So I think they're quite capable of taking care of themselves. I think we do detriment. Just think of all the money we gave to Egypt over 30 or 40 years. Now look, we were buying friendship. Now there's a civil war. They're less friendly to Israel. That whole thing is going to backfire once we go bankrupt and we remove our troops. So I think we should be very cautious in our willingness to go to war and send troops without a proper declaration by the U.S. Congress.
My name is Paul Wolfowitz. I'm a visiting scholar at the American Enterprise Institute, and my question is about development assistance. Under George W. Bush, who was a conservative Republican, the United States spent billions of dollars to fight AIDS and malaria in Africa and elsewhere, and set up the Millennium Challenge Corporation to encourage governments of poor countries to pursue policies that promote economic growth and job creation. Do you believe those are still wise expenditures, or do you think that we can no longer afford them?
Ron Paul.
I think the aid is all worthless. It doesn't do any good for most of the people. You take money from poor people in this country and you end up giving it to rich people in poor countries. And they're used as weapons of war, so you accomplish nothing. We should export maybe some principles about free markets and sound money, and maybe they could produce some of their own wealth. But this whole idea of talking about the endless wars and the endless foreign aid, it seems like nobody cares about the budget. I mean, we're in big trouble, and nobody wants to cut anything. So if you're going to keep sending foreign aid overseas and these endless wars that you don't have to declare and go into Libya without even consulting with the Congress, the biggest threat to our national security is our financial condition. And this is just aggravating it.
Governor Romney.
Congressman Paul, what they're doing is cutting $1 trillion out of the defense budget. They're cutting $1 trillion out of the defense budget, which just happens to equal the $1 trillion they're putting into Obamacare. And so what you have is a president that has a priority of spending us into bankruptcy, but he's not just spending us into bankruptcy, he's spending the money foolishly. We need to protect America and protect our troops and our military and stop the idea of Obamacare. That's the best way to save money, not the military.
But hold on one second, because Ron Paul wants to respond to that point.
Well, they're not cutting anything out of anything. All this talk is just talk. Believe me. They're nibbling away at baseline budgeting. It's automatic increases. There's nothing cut against the military, and the people on the Hill are nearly hysterical because the budget isn't going up as rapidly as they wanted to. It's a road to disaster. We better wake up.
Oh, okay.
I'd like to turn it back a little closer to home and talk about what's going on in the borders, our southern border. As all of you know, the drug-related crimes and violence are getting heavier and heavier in that area. First, do you consider that to be a national interest threat? And secondly, what could we be doing with the Mexican government to help stop these drug cartels?
Governor Perry, you represent the state with the longest border with Mexico right now. What do you think you should do if you were president of the United States as far as using the United States military?
Well, let me kind of broaden it out. I think it's time for a 21st century Monroe Doctrine.
Congressman Paul, you're from Texas. You agree with your governor?
Not entirely. No, the drug war was mentioned. I think that's another war we ought to cancel because it is to nobody's benefit. And that's where the violence is coming from. But yes, we do have a national responsibility for our borders. What I'm sort of tired of is all the money spent and lives lost worrying about the borders between Pakistan and Afghanistan, forgetting about our borders between the United States and Mexico. We should think more about, what we're doing at home. We need better immigration services, obviously. But, if you subsidize something or give people incentives, you get more of it. So if you give easy road to citizenship, you're going to have more illegals. If you have a weak economy, which is understandable and we should have prevented, that's understandable. But mandating to the states and to Texas that we have to provide free medical care and free education, that's a great burden. It was a great burden to California and all the border states. So I would say eliminate all these benefits and talk about eliminating the welfare state because it's detrimental not only to here but the people that come because that's the incentive to bring their families with them.
But I just wanted you to clarify, when you say cancel the war on drugs, does that mean legalize all these drugs?
I think the federal war on drugs is a total failure. You can at least let sick people have marijuana because it's helpful, but compassionate conservatives say, well, we can't do this. We're going to put people who are sick and dying with cancer and they're being helped with marijuana if they have multiple sclerosis. The federal government's going in there and overriding state laws and putting people like that in prison. Why don't we handle the drugs like we had alcohol? Alcohol is a deadly drug. What about the real deadly drugs are the prescription drugs? They kill a lot more people than the illegal drugs. So the drug war is out of control. I fear the drug war because it undermines our civil liberties. It magnifies our problems on the borders. We spend, over the last 40 years, $1 trillion on this war. And believe me, the kids can still get the drugs. It just hasn't worked.
Herman Cain, let me let you weigh in.
Yes.
The United States adopted a policy of disengagement with Somalia after its retreat following Black Hawk Down. Today, an al-Qaeda affiliate, al-Shabaab, controls significant territory in that country. What can the United States do to prevent al-Shabaab from posing the same threat that al-Qaeda did from Afghanistan 10 years ago?
Congressman Paul?
You're talking about al-Qaeda, correct? No. You have to understand who the al-Qaeda really is. The al-Qaeda responds in a very deliberate fashion. Matter of fact, Paul Wolfowitz explained it very clearly after 9/11. He said that al-Qaeda is inspired by the fact that we had bases in Saudi Arabia. So if you want to inspire al-Qaeda, just meddle in that region. That will inspire the al-Qaeda. Matter of fact, he went on to say that that was a good reason for us to remove the base that we had in 15 years in Saudi Arabia, and that we shouldn't have done that. So there is a response. Al-Qaeda responds to that, and they're quite annoyed with it. So if you have a no-fly zone over Syria, that's an act of war. What if we had China put a no-fly zone over our territory? I don't think we would like that. And I think we should practice a policy of goodwill to other people. What about saying that we don't do anything to any other country that we don't have them do to us? When we had a no-fly zone over Iraq, it was meant to be regime change, and evidently some want to have regime change. But what is our business? Why should we spend more money and more lives to get involved in another war? That is the internal affairs of the other nations, and we don't need another nation to start nation building. We have way too many already. So this is just looking for more trouble. I would say, why don't we mind our own business?
Governor. Congressman.
I worry most about overreaction on our part, getting involved in another war when we don't need to, when we haven't been attacked, and our national security has not been at threat. And I worry a lot about people never come around to understanding who the Taliban is and why they are motivated. Taliban doesn't mean they want to come here and kill us. The Taliban means they want to kill us over there because all they want to do is get people who occupy their country out of their country, just like we would if anybody tried to occupy us.
Governor Perry.
As they would say in China, admit 他不太了解这个情形. He doesn't quite understand this situation.
We're back with NBC News In Depth tonight. An exclusive look inside a massive city within a city funded by American taxpayers in the heart of Baghdad. It is the new and controversial U.S. Embassy. Some have quickly dubbed it Fortress America. Tonight, our chief foreign affairs correspondent, Andrea Mitchell, has been given access to the first photos and video of this enormous new compound.
It's a fortress that few taxpayers have ever seen, the largest embassy in the world. 27 buildings, 104 acres, housing for 600 people, offices for up to 1,600, and amenities not seen by most Iraqis. A swimming pool, indoor and outdoor basketball courts, seen here in pictures obtained from the contractor, First Kuwaiti. Construction costs for the embassy and additional security now more than $700 million and still climbing. Plus, Congress says more than $2 billion a year once it opens for the State Department just to operate the whole complex.
They expect that the Congress will be an ATM machine, just keep shelling out the money. And it's hard to find anybody who has the responsibility for all the screw-ups.
After a 6-month delay, the massive compound was supposed to be ready for business next month. First Kuwaiti points out it has successfully completed the design and construction and turned it over for occupancy as required. They characterize it as an absolute success. But now the State Department has told Congress it also wants to headquarter General Petraeus and 200 troops at the embassy. That would delay opening the embassy's 2 main office buildings for as long as a year.
There is still considerable work to be done to accommodate everybody.
Securing the building for General Petraeus and his staff would cost another $35 million. Critics say another example of the administration's poor planning for Iraq. And now the State Department is again threatening to order diplomats to Iraq if enough don't volunteer for duty in an embassy so big, critics say, it makes it look like the U.S. will be occupying Baghdad forever. Andrea Mitchell, NBC News.
boys and girls. Within this framework, we'll work with the Afghans to determine what support they need to accomplish two narrow security missions beyond 2014: counterterrorism and continued training. But we will not build permanent bases in this country, nor will we be patrolling its cities and mountains. That will be the job of the Afghan people. Fourth, we're pursuing a negotiated peace. In coordination with the Afghan government, my administration has been in direct discussions with the Taliban. We've made it clear that they can be a part of this future if they break with al-Qaeda, renounce violence, and abide by Afghan laws. Many members of the Taliban, from foot soldiers to leaders, have indicated an interest in reconciliation. The path to peace is now set before them. Those who refuse to walk it will face strong Afghan security forces backed by the United States and our allies. Fifth, we are building a global consensus to support
secretive oil billionaires attacking President Obama with ads fact-checkers say are not tethered to the facts, while independent watchdogs call this president's record on ethics unprecedented. And America's clean energy industry, 2.7 million jobs and expanding rapidly. For the first time in 13 years, our dependence on foreign oil is below 50%. President Obama kept his promise to toughen ethics rules and strengthen America's energy economy.
I'm Barack Obama, and I approve this message.
It was their silence that may have spoken volumes. Top executives from Solyndra appeared today in front of a House committee, but they refused to answer any questions about the bankrupt solar company.
I respect the witnesses' rights under the Fifth Amendment, but I want to make it clear today, though, that this subcommittee's investigation will continue. We have been asking questions about this deal since February of this year. We will get to the bottom of why this loan was pushed out to a company whose liquidity issues were a major issue to Department of Energy staff reviewing the loan back in 2009.
Solyndra received $528 million in loans from the Energy Department 2 years ago and is now being investigated by the government.
Welcome, everybody. I'm Neil Cavuto, and Halloween might still be 30 days away, but this is scary today. Chinese hackers breaching a White House computer. No harm done, the White House says, and no classified information compromised, it insists. We're going to have a lot more on all of this with Ed Henry at the White House, but the very fact the Chinese hackers got as far as they did has security experts worried. Make that very worried. For 2 years now, it has been an open secret that China's been phishing, as they call it, U.S. corporate secrets. Security types noting this takes it to a whole new level, and again, a much more worrisome level. Gordon Chang is an expert on all things China and says this latest attack doesn't only prove how brazen the Chinese are, but how unprepared we are. Good to see you, my friend. Hacking a computer isn't rocket science. Getting to the level of the White House is noteworthy.
Yes, and also they went into the White House military office that is the one responsible for keeping America's nuclear launch codes. You know, if they could compromise those, we'd be in a real world of hurt. But, you know, you're right. They have gotten so far. And part of the reason is because attackers normally have an advantage, and that's true for cyber attackers as well. But there's another element to this, and that is for years we have been afraid to acknowledge that the Chinese have been behind, you know, an unprecedented series of attacks, not only for espionage, but also to try all sorts of other things. And, you know, if we're not willing to have those honest conversations with the Chinese and with ourselves, then of course we can't do very much to protect American networks.
But we're kind of afraid of the Chinese, right? I mean, they own so much of our debt. A lot of companies want to make sure they stay on their good side, expanding to China. So we just turn the other cheek, or what?
Well, we can't, because, you know, this has now gotten, as you say, to a whole new level.
Well, what made this worrisome to you?
Well, it is because of the nuclear launch codes. It is because this is the president. You know, the president's travel arrangements, his communications when he's on Air Force One. This is the office that is responsible for making sure he stays in touch with the American military. And that means our security.
Now, a lot of security experts also tell me, Gordon, at best what they did is interrupt the system, hack into it without necessarily disrupting it. In other words, without getting codes, without getting the president's schedule, just enough to, like if someone sent you a virus-plagued email, you touch it and open it, your computer goes down.
Yeah, well,
still bad, you know.
That's what they think today, but they really won't know for quite some time, if ever, how far the Chinese really gotten, because the Chinese have shown in other attacks that they have been able to get in and out and not be detected for quite some time afterwards.
But you mentioned brazen before, and you mentioned that there could be a method to this, what seems to be espionage madness, in that they're in trouble. China itself is in trouble. What do you mean?
Well, the country's going off the rails. If you look at electricity production statistics, manufacturing surveys, price indices, you see an economy that is growing at 1 or 2%, maybe even 0, certainly not the 7.6% that Beijing claims. You have a political transition that is obviously in real trouble with all of the intense infighting. You have the military breaking free of civilian control, and you've got China.
Well, you're saying the growth is a lot less than we're being told.
Much less.
So what do you think?
I think that it's about 0. You know, it's maybe 1, maybe -1.
I mean, this is the world's economic tiger.
Well, it used to be a world economic tiger, but now it has a growth model that is really incompatible with today's global environment. And so, therefore, this export-led, investment-heavy model isn't working. They didn't make the change to consumption 5 years ago when they could have really started it. And now they can't do it because the economy is in such distress.
So are you saying desperate times call for more bellicose behavior?
Well, I think what the party has been doing, it's been trying to distract Chinese people from what's been going on. First 2 weeks of this month, Xi Jinping, the next leader of China, goes missing from public. Right. State media is entirely quiet, but at the same time, state media ramps up the propaganda against Japan with regard to these islands that have been to deflect the attention of the Chinese people. Because this is a political organization that's primary basis of legitimacy has been the continual delivery of prosperity. When it can't deliver prosperity, it falls back on nationalism. And nationalism then brings it into conflict with countries in the region and also with the United States, because many of those countries are our treaty allies and many of the rest of them are our friends.
But what you're saying, and I have to get to Henry at the White House in a second, but if the emperor has no clothes, he gets very desperate.
He get very desperate. You know, we've seen this before in history of other countries, but also including China. And right now, there are a lot of things that are just going in the wrong direction, and we're not really trying to acknowledge that. We're not acknowledging that, and therefore, we're creating the conditions where this could get worse.
Okay, Gordon, thank you. I think Gordon Chang, the expert on China, warned about all of this long before
I second guess myself constantly about, look, I make a mistake, every hour, every day. Good afternoon, everybody. There are very few moments in our lives where we have the privilege to witness history taking place. This is one of those moments. This is one of those times. The people of Egypt have spoken, their voices have been heard, and Egypt will never be the same. By stepping down, President Mubarak responded to the Egyptian people's hunger for change. But this is not the end of Egypt's transition. It's a beginning. I'm sure there will be difficult days ahead, and many questions remain unanswered. But I am confident that the people of Egypt can find the answers and do so peacefully, constructively, and in the spirit of unity that has defined these last few weeks. For Egyptians have made it clear that nothing less than genuine democracy will carry the day. The military has served patriotically and responsibly as a caretaker to the state, and will now have to ensure a transition that is credible in the eyes of the Egyptian people. That means protecting the rights of Egypt's citizens, lifting the emergency law, revising the Constitution and other laws to make this change irreversible, and laying out a clear path to elections that are fair and free. Above all, this transition must bring all of Egypt's voices to the table. For the spirit of peaceful protest and perseverance that the Egyptian people have shown can serve as a powerful wind at the back of this change. The United States will continue to be a friend and partner to Egypt. We stand ready to provide whatever assistance is necessary and asked for to pursue a credible transition to a democracy. I'm also confident that the same ingenuity and entrepreneurial spirit that the young people of Egypt have shown in recent days can be harnessed to create new opportunity, jobs, and businesses that allow the extraordinary potential of this generation to take flight. And I know that a democratic Egypt can advance its role of responsible leadership not only in the region, but around the world. Egypt has played a pivotal role in human history for over 6,000 years. But over the last few weeks, the wheel of history turned at a blinding pace as the Egyptian people demanded their universal rights. We saw mothers and fathers carrying their children on their shoulders to show them what true freedom might look like. We saw a young Egyptian say, "For the first time in my life, I really count. My voice is heard. Even though I'm only one person, this is the way real democracy works." We saw protesters chant, "Salmiya, Salmiya. We are peaceful," again and again. We saw a military that would not fire bullets at the people they were sworn to protect. And we saw doctors and nurses rushing into the streets to care for those who were wounded. Volunteers checking protesters to ensure that they were unarmed. We saw people of faith praying together and chanting, "Muslims, Christians, we are one." And though we know that the strains between faiths still divide too many in this world, and no single event will close that chasm immediately, these scenes remind us that we need not be defined by our differences. We can be defined by the common humanity that we share. And above all, we saw a new generation emerge, a generation that uses their own creativity and talent and technology to call for a government that represented their hopes and not their fears, a government that is responsive to their boundless aspirations. One Egyptian put it simply: most people have discovered in the last few days that they are worth something, and this cannot be taken away from them anymore, ever. This is the power of human dignity, and it can never be denied. Egyptians have inspired us, and they've done so by putting the lie to the idea that justice is best gained through violence. For in Egypt, it was the moral force of nonviolence, not terrorism, not mindless killing, but nonviolence, moral force that bent the arc of history toward justice once more. And while the sights and sounds that we heard were entirely Egyptian, we can't help but hear the echoes of history. Echoes from Germans tearing down a wall, Indonesian students taking to the streets, Gandhi leading his people down the path of justice. As Martin Luther King said in celebrating the birth of a new nation in Ghana, while trying to perfect his own, there's something in the soul that cries out for freedom. Those were the cries that came from Tahrir Square, and the entire world has taken note. Today belongs to the people of Egypt, and the American people are moved by these scenes in Cairo and across Egypt because of who we are as a people and the kind of world that we want our children to grow up in. The word Tahrir means liberation. It is a word that speaks to that something in our souls that cries out for freedom. And forevermore, it will remind us of the Egyptian people, of what they did, of the things that they stood for, and how they changed their country, and in doing so, changed the world. Thank you.